sought their first contact. General Zixathara stood on the bridge of the massive dreadnought, Eternal Dominion. Her 4 arms crossed behind her back as she gazed at the blue marble floating in the darkness. Earth, the 3rd planet from a small yellow star inhabited by a species that called themselves humans. According to the Galactic Council's records, they were a young race that had barely achieved faster-than-light travel. "General," came the voice of Commander Veltar, her tactical officer. "Our scouts report that the human fleet has positioned themselves in a defensive formation around their homeworld." Zixthara's mandibles clicked in what her species considered amusement. "How many ships do they have?" "Approximately 300 vessels, General. Most appear to be outdated by our standards. Chemical propulsion, primitive energy weapons, and what looks like kinetic projectile systems." The general's second heart beat faster with anticipation. In her 2 centuries of military service, she had conquered 17 different species for the hegemony. Each time, it followed the same pattern. The younger races would see their massive fleet, understand the hopelessness of their situation, and surrender. Then came the standard occupation, resource extraction, and integration into the hegemony's vast empire. Humans would be no different. "Open a communication channel to their command vessel," Zixthara ordered. Her translation implant activated, ready to convert her words into the crude human language. The view screen flickered to life, showing a human male in what appeared to be a military uniform. He had short gray hair, weathered features, and eyes that reminded Zixathara of the ice-cold worlds at the edge of known space. "I am Admiral Marcus Chen of the United Earth Defense Force," the human said, his voice steady despite facing a fleet that outnumbered his own 10-1. "State your intentions." Zixthara stepped forward, her massive frame filling the communication screen. At nearly 3 meters tall, with chitinous armor-like skin and glowing orange eyes, she had learned that her appearance alone was often enough to break the spirit of lesser species. "I am General Zixthara of the 3rd Hegemony Fleet. By the authority granted to me by the Galactic Council, I hereby claim this system and all its resources for the hegemony. You will stand down your forces immediately and prepare for occupation." Admiral Chen's expression didn't change. If anything, Zixathara thought she saw something like a smile at the corner of his mouth. "I appreciate the introduction, General, but I'm afraid we'll have to decline your generous offer. Earth is not for sale, rent, or conquest." Commander Veltar's antennae twitched in confusion. "General, perhaps their translation systems are malfunctioning. The human appears to be rejecting our terms." But Zixthara had heard correctly. In all her years of conquest, no species had ever simply said no to the overwhelming force of a hegemony fleet. They begged, they pleaded, they tried to negotiate, but they never just refused. "Human," Zixthara said, her voice taking on the tone she used when addressing particularly slow subordinates. "Perhaps you do not understand the situation. We have 3,000 warships. Our technology is superior to yours in every measurable way. Your weapons cannot penetrate our shields. Your ships cannot outrun ours. Surrender now, and your species will be granted worker status in the hegemony. Continue this foolishness, and you will be classified as a hostile species and dealt with accordingly." Admiral Chen leaned back in his chair, actually looking relaxed. "General, I think you're the one who doesn't understand the situation. You see, humans have a saying, 'Give me liberty or give me death.' We didn't crawl out of caves, survive ice ages, and build starships just to roll over the first time someone bigger showed up." Zixthara felt a stirring of something she hadn't experienced in decades. Uncertainty. Every species they had encountered followed predictable patterns. When faced with overwhelming force, intelligent beings chose survival over pride. It was a universal constant, wasn't it? "You speak of death as if it's preferable to life," Zixthera said. "This is illogical. Your species will survive as part of the hegemony. You will be fed, housed, given meaningful work. Many species consider integration a blessing." Integration, Admiral Chen repeated as if tasting the word. "Is that what you call slavery now? That's creative. I'll give you that." The bridge of the Eternal Dominion fell silent. In the background, Zixthera could hear the soft humming of the ship's systems, the quiet beeping of monitoring equipment, and the almost imperceptible whisper of recycled air. Her crew was listening to every word, and she could sense their growing confusion. "Admiral," Zixthera said, trying a different approach, "I have studied your species' history during our approach to your system. Humans fight among themselves constantly. You have wars, conflicts, disagreements about resources and territory. Surely you understand that resistance is futile when faced with superior force." "Oh, we understand superior force just fine," Chen replied. "We've been dealing with it our whole history. Sometimes we lose, sometimes we win. But we always fight. It's what we do. Even when victory is impossible? Especially when victory is impossible." Zixthera felt her primary heart skip a beat. She had conquered species that were stronger, faster, and more technologically advanced than humans. But none of them had ever spoken about impossible odds with what sounded almost like enthusiasm. "General," Commander Veltar said quietly, "perhaps we should simply begin the bombardment. Their irrational behavior suggests mental instability. It would be merciful to end this quickly." But Zixthera found herself genuinely curious now. "Admiral Chen, explain to me why your species would choose destruction over survival." The human's smile became more pronounced. "General, let me tell you something about humans. We're not the strongest species that evolved on Earth. We're not the fastest. We don't have claws or fangs or natural armor. What we have is something that apparently makes no sense to you." "And what is that?" "Stubbornness. Pure, stupid, magnificent stubbornness. We decided we were going to be the apex predators on our planet, so we became them. We decided we were going to fly, so we built machines to do it. We decided we were going to leave our world and touch the stars, so here we are. And now we've decided that Earth belongs to humans, not to some galactic empire that thinks bigger fleets mean automatic victory." Zixthera stared at the human admiral. In her experience, species that spoke about such impossibilities were usually delusional. But there was something in Chen's eyes, something in his posture, that suggested he believed every word he was saying. "Your confidence is admirable, Admiral, but confidence does not stop plasma cannons or neutron bombs." "No," Chen agreed. "But you know what confidence does do? It makes us try things that no sane species would attempt. It makes us fight in ways that break all the rules. It makes us ignore limits that everyone else accepts as absolute truth." "Such as?" "You'll find out soon enough. General, your move." The communication ended, leaving the bridge of the Eternal Dominion in stunned silence. Zixthera stood motionless for nearly a full minute, processing what she had just heard. "General?" Veltar asked hesitantly. "Prepare the fleet for battle," Zixthera said finally. "But maintain formation. I want to see what these humans think they can do against the Third Fleet." As her crew moved to carry out her orders, Zixthera found herself thinking about the humans' words, ignoring limits, fighting in ways that break all the rules. In her centuries of military service, she had seen many species make desperate last stands. But something about the human admiral's demeanor suggested this would be different. She was about to find out how different. The human fleet began moving, not in the chaotic panic she expected, but in precise, coordinated formations. Their ships were smaller, yes, and their technology appeared primitive, but they moved with a purpose that made Zixthera's tactical instincts suddenly scream warnings. "General," her sensor officer called out. I'm detecting unusual energy signatures from the human vessels. They appear to be charging something. Weapons? Unknown, General. The energy patterns don't match anything in our databases. Zixathara watched the tactical display as the human ships continued their approach. They were vastly outnumbered, outgunned, and outmatched in every conventional sense. By every rule of warfare she had learned, they should be fleeing or surrendering. Instead, they were accelerating. "General," Veltar said, his voice tight with confusion. "They're not even trying to call for reinforcements or evacuate their civilians. They're just coming straight at us." "So they are," Zixthera murmured, watching as 300 human ships charged toward 3,000 hegemony vessels without hesitation, without fear, and apparently without any regard for the mathematical impossibility of their situation. For the first time in her long military career, General Zixathara began to wonder if she had made a terrible mistake. The battle that broke all rules. The first wave of human ships hit the hegemony fleet like a storm that had been building for millennia. General Zixathara watched in growing disbelief as her perfectly ordered battle lines encountered something that defied every tactical manual ever written. "Report!" she barked, as alarms began sounding throughout the bridge of the Eternal Dominion. "The lead human vessels just exploded, General," her sensor officer stammered. "But not from our weapons. They detonated themselves." "Suicide attacks?" Zixathara's mandibles clicked rapidly. "That's not unusual. Many desperate species attempt— No, General, they're not suicide attacks. They're using their ships as delivery systems." On the main display, Zixthera watched as the burning remains of the first human vessels released clouds of something into space. Within seconds, her own ships began reporting system failures. "What are they deploying?" she demanded. Commander Veltar looked up from his console, his expression one of complete bewilderment. "General, according to our sensors, they're releasing microscopic machines. Millions of them." "Impossible. No species has that level of nanotechnology." "The humans apparently do, General. These machines are attacking our hull integrity, our shield generators, even our life support systems. They're reproducing using materials from our own ships." Zixthara felt a chill run through her exoskeleton. Self-replicating nanotechnology was theoretical, even for the hegemony. The energy requirements alone should have been prohibitive for such a primitive species. "How are they powering these machines?" "That's just it, General. They're not. The nanobots are converting matter directly into energy. They're using our own ships as fuel." Before Zixathara could respond, a new wave of human vessels approached. But these ships were different. Instead of the sleek lines of military vessels, they looked like cargo freighters. "General, incoming transmission from the human fleet." Admiral Chen's face appeared on the screen again, but now he was standing in what looked like the bridge of one of those cargo ships. Behind him, Zixathara could see humans of all ages, including what appeared to be civilians. "Having trouble with our welcome gift, General?" Chen asked, his voice carrying that same unsettling confidence. "You're using forbidden weapons," Zixthera accused. "Self-replicating technology is banned by 17 different galactic treaties." "Funny thing about galactic treaties," Chen replied. "Earth never signed them. Hard to follow rules when nobody bothered to tell you they existed." Another alarm sounded on the bridge. "General, we're losing the crushing victory and the inevitable doom. The nanobots have compromised their primary power systems." Zixthera turned back to Chen. "Call off your machines, Admiral. This escalation serves no purpose. We can discuss terms." "Terms?" Chen laughed, and the sound sent an unexpected shiver through Zixathara's secondary nervous system. "General, you came here to conquer us. You told us to surrender or die. Well, we've made our choice. You chose death? We chose something your species apparently doesn't understand. We chose to fight in ways you've never seen before." As if to emphasize his point, the cargo ships suddenly accelerated toward the hegemony fleet. But instead of weapons fire, they began ejecting cargo containers. "What are they doing now?" Zixthara muttered. "General, those containers, they're full of humans, thousands of them, in some kind of environmental suits." Zixthara stared at the tactical display as thousands of tiny dots separated from the cargo containers and began moving independently through space. "They're deploying ground troops in the vacuum of space?" "It appears so, General, but I don't understand the tactical purpose. Infantry cannot survive in—" The censor officer's words were cut off as the first group of humans reached one of the outer hegemony vessels. Within minutes, the ship's IFF signal changed from friendly to unknown. "They've taken the merciless strike," Veltar reported, his voice hollow with disbelief. "A full crew of 2,000 hegemony soldiers, defeated by infantry, in space." More ships began falling to the human boarding parties. But what disturbed Zixthara most was how quickly it happened. Hegemony troops were some of the finest soldiers in the galaxy, equipped with advanced weapons and armor, yet they were being overwhelmed by humans in primitive environmental suits. "How?" Zixthara whispered. Admiral Chen seemed to hear her question across the void. "Want to know our secret, General? We don't fight fair. Never have, never will. Those soldiers you're so proud of, they've been trained to fight other soldiers in controlled environments following established rules of engagement." On the screen, Zixthara could see more human cargo ships approaching, but these looked different, older, like museum pieces. "Our people," Chen continued, "learned to fight on a world that was actively trying to kill them. Ice ages, volcanic eruptions, plagues, predators, natural disasters that would wipe out entire civilizations. We learned that survival doesn't care about fairness or rules or proper military protocol. But space combat requires adaptation," Chen interrupted. "See those old ships coming toward you? Those are museum pieces, ships that haven't seen service in decades. Want to know who's crewing them?" Zixthara found herself afraid to ask. "Retired veterans, grandfathers and grandmothers who fought in our last major war. They volunteered when they heard about your invasion, didn't even ask for weapons upgrades, said they'd make do with what they had." The museum ships opened fire, but not with energy weapons or missiles. Instead, they launched what appeared to be simple metal projectiles. "Kinetic rounds," Veltar observed. "Primitive, but moving at significant velocity." "Not just kinetic rounds," Chen corrected, somehow hearing the tactical analysis. "Every piece of space debris we've been collecting for the last century. Every failed satellite, every broken ship component, every piece of cosmic dust we could gather. All accelerated to a significant fraction of light speed." The result was devastating. The hegemony shields, designed to deflect energy weapons and sophisticated missiles, were completely unprepared for clouds of high-velocity debris. Ships that had survived centuries of warfare found their hulls punctured by chunks of metal that cost virtually nothing to produce. "This is madness," Zixthara breathed. "No civilized species fights this way." "Civilized," Chen repeated, as if tasting the word. "There's that perspective problem again, General. You keep assuming we follow the same rules you do." More alarms sounded. Zixthara's fleet was taking significant casualties, but not from superior technology or overwhelming force. They were being defeated by creativity, improvisation, and a complete disregard for conventional military doctrine. "General," her communications officer called out, "we're receiving surrender requests from 17 of our vessels. They're asking to discuss terms with the human boarding parties." "Surrender requests? From hegemony soldiers?" "Yes, General. Apparently the humans have been persuasive." Admiral Chen smiled on the screen. "Want to know what we told your soldiers, General? We told them the truth, that this war doesn't have to end with their deaths." that they could choose to fight for something other than an empire that treats them as expendable. You're turning my own troops against me? We're giving them options they've never had before. Funny thing about sentient beings, General. When you treat them like individuals instead of resources, they tend to respond positively. Zixathera looked around her bridge. Her crew was staring at their displays with expressions she had never seen before. Confusion, yes, but also something else. Something that looked almost like curiosity. "How many ships have we lost?" she asked quietly. 417 confirmed, General. Another 200 are reporting significant damage or systems failures. Nearly a quarter of her fleet, defeated by a species that shouldn't have been able to scratch the paint on her ships. Zixathera felt something she hadn't experienced in centuries. Doubt. "Admiral Chen," she said, her voice carefully controlled. "What are your terms?" "Terms?" Chen looked genuinely surprised. "General, I thought I made this clear. We don't surrender. Ever. The question is whether you want to keep throwing your people against us until you run out of ships, or if you want to try a different approach." "Such as?" "Learning." Zixathera's 4 eyes narrowed. "Learning what?" "Learning that the universe is a lot bigger and more interesting than your hegemony ever imagined. Learning that there are ways of thinking, fighting, and living that don't fit into your neat little categories. Learning that maybe, just maybe, conquest isn't the only way to interact with other species." Another wave of human ships approached. But these were different again, smaller, more agile, and moving in patterns that hurt Zixathera's brain to watch. "What are those vessels?" "Racing ships," Chen said casually. "Modified civilian craft, fast, maneuverable, and crewed by people who consider crashing into things at high speed a form of entertainment." The racing ships began weaving through the hegemony formation, not attacking directly, but somehow causing massive disruption. Ships collided as they tried to track the impossible maneuvers. Formation integrity collapsed as captains found themselves unable to predict where the humans would go next. "They're not even trying to damage us," Veltar observed in wonder. "They're just confusing us into damaging ourselves." "Chaos," Admiral Chen said, as if reading their thoughts. "Another human specialty. We've learned that sometimes the best way to defeat a superior force is to make them defeat themselves." Zixathera realized with growing horror that this was exactly what was happening. Her carefully organized fleet, trained for centuries of precise military operations, was falling apart because they couldn't adapt to an enemy that refused to follow any recognizable pattern. "General," her tactical officer said quietly, "perhaps we should consider withdrawal." For the first time in her long career, General Zixathera found herself seriously considering retreat. Not because she was outgunned or outmaneuvered, but because she was facing something she had never encountered before. An enemy that fought without limits, without rules, and apparently without fear. "Admiral," she said finally, "I believe we need to talk." The universe changes forever. The meeting took place aboard a human space station that had been hastily constructed from the wreckage of both fleets. General Zixathera stood in what the humans called a neutral zone, though nothing about this encounter felt neutral to her. The station itself was a perfect example of human thinking. Instead of building something new, they had simply welded together pieces of destroyed ships into something functional. "It's not pretty," Admiral Chen admitted, noticing her examination of the improvised structure. "But it works. That's very human, I'm afraid." Zixathera found herself studying the human more carefully than she had during their battles. Without the urgency of combat, she could see details she had missed before. Chen was old for his species, probably nearing the end of his natural lifespan. His hands showed scars from what appeared to be manual labor. Most telling of all, he wore no visible signs of rank or status beyond a simple uniform. In hegemony tradition, Zixthera said carefully. The defeated general presents their sword to the victor. Good thing we're not following hegemony tradition then, Chen replied. Besides, I'm not sure who won this particular fight. My fleet is crippled. Your losses were minimal, by any military standard. Military standards, Chen interrupted with that familiar smile. There you go again, assuming we think the same way you do. They were joined by other humans, and Zixthera was surprised by the diversity, not just in appearance, though humans showed far more physical variation than most species, but in apparent profession and background. She recognized military personnel, but also individuals who were clearly civilians, scientists, even what appeared to be artists. General Zixthera, Chen said formally, let me introduce our negotiating team. Dr. Sarah Kim, our lead xenobiologist, Professor James Okafor, who studies galactic politics, Maria Santos, who represents our civilian governments, and Zhang Wei, who's here because he builds impossible things for fun. Zixthera looked confused. Where are your military leaders, your strategic planners? They're here too, Chen said. But we've learned that the best solutions usually come from including different perspectives, another human quirk. Dr. Kim stepped forward, her expression showing genuine curiosity rather than the triumph or hostility Zixthera had expected. General, we've been studying the weapons and technology your fleet used against us. They're remarkable. Some of the engineering solutions are completely beyond our current capabilities. Yet you defeated us. We surprised you, Professor Okafor corrected. There's a difference. Your technology is superior, your ships are more advanced, and your soldiers are better trained. But you expected us to fight like everyone else you've conquered. Zhang Wei, the one Chen had introduced as someone who builds impossible things, spoke up. We're not better than you, General. We're just different. And sometimes different is enough. Maria Santos moved to what appeared to be a viewing port, looking out at the combined wreckage floating in space. General, may I ask you something? In all your years of conquest, did you ever wonder if there might be better ways to interact with other species? Zixthera's mandibles clicked slowly. The hegemony brings order, stability, and progress to chaotic systems. Our methods may seem harsh, but they are effective. For who? Dr. Kim asked gently. The question hung in the air like a challenge. Zixthera found herself thinking about the surrender requests from her own troops, about the ease with which humans had convinced hegemony soldiers to reconsider their loyalties. Our empire spans thousands of systems, Zixthera said finally. We have eliminated war between species, standardized technology and communication, and created the largest peaceful civilization in galactic history. Peaceful, Admiral Chen repeated, except for the part where you conquer everyone by force. Order requires structure. Structure requires authority. Not all species are capable of self-governance. Professor Okafor leaned forward. General, with respect, that's exactly what every empire in history has said about its subjects. It's also exactly what humans said about each other for most of our history. We were wrong, Maria Santos added. Humans spent centuries believing that some groups were naturally superior to others, that conquest was inevitable, that order could only come through domination. We learned better. How? Zhang Wei grinned. We kept fighting each other until we got tired of it. Took us a while, but eventually we figured out that cooperation worked better than conquest. Dr. Kim pulled up a holographic display showing Earth's history. We had hundreds of different governments, thousands of different cultures, dozens of different species we shared the planet with. For the longest time, we thought that meant conflict was inevitable. What changed? We started talking to each other instead of just talking about each other, Admiral Chen said. Turns out, when you actually listen to different perspectives, you learn things you never would have discovered on your own. Zixthera studied the humans around her. They showed none of the deference she expected from conquered species, but also none of the arrogance she associated with victors. Instead, they seemed genuinely interested in understanding her perspective. "You are proposing an alternative to hegemony rule," she said slowly. "We're proposing an alternative to rule, period," Maria Santos corrected. "What if, instead of conquest, you tried cooperation? What if, instead of forcing other species to join your empire, you invited them to participate in something bigger?" "Such as?" Professor Okafor activated another display, showing a complex web of connections between star systems. Voluntary association, trade agreements instead of resource extraction, scientific collaboration instead of technology confiscation, cultural exchange instead of cultural assimilation. Zixthara stared at the display. "This is chaos. Without central authority, without unified command structure, how do you maintain order?" "Order," Zhang Wei said thoughtfully, "or control, because those are two different things." Dr. Kim added, "General, we've been analyzing the social structures of species the hegemony has conquered. Did you know that most of them had lower crime rates, higher innovation indices, and greater individual satisfaction before they were integrated? Impossible. The hegemony provides security, resources, purpose. The hegemony provides servitude," Admiral Chen said bluntly. "And in our experience, most intelligent beings prefer freedom, even if it comes with uncertainty." Zixthara felt something shifting in her understanding, like a fundamental assumption being quietly undermined. "You are suggesting that our entire civilization is built on a false premise." "We're suggesting that there might be better ways to organize a galactic civilization," Maria Santos said gently. "Ways that don't require anyone to surrender their independence or identity." "Show me," Zixthara said suddenly. The humans exchanged glances. "Show you what?" Chen asked. "Show me how your system works, your chaotic, impossible, rule-breaking system. I want to understand how you can achieve anything without central authority." Zhang Wei's grin widened. "Oh, this is going to be fun." Over the following days, Zixthara found herself experiencing something she had never imagined: an education in human civilization. She observed their decision-making processes, where multiple viewpoints were not just tolerated, but actively sought. She watched their scientific collaborations, where researchers shared information freely instead of hoarding it for strategic advantage. She witnessed their cultural exchanges, where differences were celebrated rather than eliminated. Most disturbing of all, she saw how they dealt with conflict. Instead of imposing solutions from above, they encouraged involved parties to find their own resolutions. Instead of punishment for disobedience, they used something they called restorative justice that focused on repairing damage rather than inflicting suffering. "This should not work," she told Admiral Chen after a particularly complex negotiation between human colonies. "Without absolute authority, without clear hierarchies, your society should collapse into anarchy." "Why?" Chen asked simply. Because intelligent beings are naturally competitive. They fight for resources, for territory, for dominance. Without strong control, they would destroy each other. "Is that what you believe about yourself, General?" The question stopped Zixthara cold. "What do you mean? Do you personally want to fight and dominate and control others? Or do you do those things because that's what your society expects of you?" For the first time in her long life, Zixthara found herself questioning not just her orders, but her fundamental understanding of what it meant to be a sentient being. She started, then stopped. "I have never considered the distinction." Dr. Kim joined them carrying a data pad. "General, we've been in communication with some of your crews, the ones who surrendered during the battle. Would you like to know what they told us?" Zixthara nodded, though part of her dreaded the answer. They said they had never been asked what they wanted before, never been given choices about their own lives, never been treated as individuals rather than instruments of state policy. And most of them don't want to go back. The words hit Zixthara like a physical blow, her own soldiers choosing alien captivity over hegemony service. It should have been impossible. "What do they want?" she asked quietly. "To learn," Dr. Kim said simply. "To explore. To contribute to something they believe in rather than something they fear. To be part of building something new instead of maintaining something old." Admiral Chen placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "General, what do you want?" The question echoed in the improvised station, surrounded by wreckage from a battle that had changed everything. Zixthara realized that in all her centuries of life, no one had ever asked her that question. "I want to understand," she said finally. "I want to understand how you have achieved the impossible." "Which impossibility in particular?" Zhang Wei asked with characteristic humor. "All of them. Peace without conquest, progress without control, cooperation without domination, order without oppression." Maria Santos smiled. "Those aren't impossibilities, General. They're just possibilities that most civilizations never try to achieve." "And you would teach this to me, to my people, even after we came here to conquer you?" "Especially because you came here to conquer us," Admiral Chen replied. "Because now you've seen that there are alternatives, and once you've seen possibilities, you can never unsee them." Zixthara looked around the station, at the humans who had defeated her through sheer refusal to accept defeat, at the wreckage of two fleets that had become the foundation for something new. "The hegemony will not understand," she warned. "Then we'll have to help them understand," Professor Okafor said. "The same way we helped you. You are proposing to change the fundamental structure of galactic civilization. We're proposing to show the galaxy that there are better ways to live together," Dr. Kim corrected. "What happens after that is up to everyone else." Zixthara felt something she had never experienced before. Hope. Not hope for victory or conquest or domination, but hope for something entirely new. "Where do we begin?" she asked. Admiral Chen's smile was like sunrise after a long, dark night. "We begin by doing what humans do best, General. We ignore every limit anyone has ever told us was absolute. And we build something impossible." And in that moment, surrounded by the wreckage of old assumptions and the raw materials of revolutionary change, General Zixthara began to understand why humans were truly the most dangerous species in the galaxy. Not because they were stronger or smarter or more technologically advanced, but because they refused to accept that anything was impossible. The universe would never be the same.